Shorena Messerli is a Georgian citizen. Georgia is a country located at the crossroads of Western Asia and Eastern Europe. She has a background in law, focusing on human rights, but also an avid Georgian wine evangelist. Now residing in Switzerland, she opened an online wine shop with her husband and works in local NGOs part-time to help asylum seekers. We're glad to have her here today, talking about her work on human rights and, of course, Georgian wine. Hello, Shorena. Welcome to our podcast today.
Hi, Essie. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Nice to have you here too. And tell us a little bit about your personal story. That you're a human rights lawyer and you're from Georgia. And many of the audience might think that Georgia is the state from the US, but where is Georgia? Or what did you do in Georgia?
Yes. So Georgia is a small country at the crossroad of Asia and Europe. It is a country. It's not the state. That's the mostly mistaken thing about Georgia. I remember you coming to Georgia a couple of years ago and saying, "Oh my God, this feels actually so far away. I thought it was closer." But for many people, it felt and maybe still feels a bit far away, even though it is really at the border of Europe and Asia. I like to ask people who have to Georgia how they would describe the country. I specifically ask whether they feel it's Europe, whether it's Asia, and they always tell me, no, it's neither nor. It's something in between. But for me and for my generation, with considering all the aspirations and values that we have, I can relate it to more European, especially after the revolution and the political change that we had in the early 2000s. But our tradition, and that is kept up until today, in many ways relates to Asia, even the food. So it's really interesting. And the more I go back to Georgia, now that I have lived outside Georgia for over 5-6 years, I fell in love with our tradition and culture more and more, and I appreciate this unique, uninterrupted traditions that we have. One of which is, of course, winemaking, but we can talk about it later.
Yeah, we will talk about the wine later from Georgia, which is very interesting because I know that you have a background, like your study is human rights, and then later on you venture into importing Georgian wine. So maybe tell us why you decided to study human rights.
Mm-hmm. Actually, if you had told me 5-6 years ago that I would be living in Switzerland having an online Georgian wine shop, I would not have believed, because back then I was fully and exclusively invested in the nonprofit sector. I had no intention of joining the business world. Firstly, because I thought businesses are primarily for making money. It was something that I did not aspire. I wanted to help vulnerable communities. I had myself the first-hand experience of the devastation effect of conflict. I knew how hard it could be for certain groups, especially for women, to overcome the challenges. And the moment I heard about the concept of human rights, that was when I studied for my law degree at the State University, I realized that that is exactly what I want to do. For over 5 years, I worked in Georgia for different national and international organizations. I joined the small NGO that helped the victims of the August Russian-Georgian War. I interviewed them to present their cases to the European Court of Human Rights, and I felt that those victims, not just the victims of war, but generally victims of human rights, needed somebody to help them have their voices heard. After working for 5 years, I decided to continue my studies in the international human rights. I did my LLM degree in international human rights law outside of Georgia, and right after my graduation, I moved to Switzerland for family reasons. It was actually here, first time in my life, that I kind of had this opportunity to take time off, to pause, to reflect, and in many ways to find new ways to expand outside my field. Because I realized that many of the human rights arguments were often confronted by the major disbelief and criticism in favor of the economic growth and stability. So I knew you could not find really long-term sustainable human rights solutions without providing some economic logic with it. Besides many human rights topics, especially when it comes to social economic rights, such as right to education, right to housing, right to adequate standard of living, or right to health, all of them comes with a set of costs, and just the commitment or the will to ensure those rights are not enough. You have to have certain resources. And here is where my interest towards business started to grow, because I believe that businesses have responsibilities, and they are accountable for not just towards their stakeholders or the economic market, financial market, but also for the society at large, because whatever they do, it has implications for the greater good, for the whole society. So I became increasingly aware of this economic logic that can be used in favor of human rights, instead of disregarding the whole economic efficiency argument and focusing merely on the ethics and on the international law and conventions that have been signed. Another factor actually is a bit selfish, because in many ways, after I moved to Georgia, I rediscovered my own country and I fell in love with it. Every time we would go back with my husband, with my Swiss family or my friends, I would appreciate more and more our culture, especially when it came to the culture of hospitality, big part of which was the wine. I would always try to convey this. Also in Switzerland, we would always import wine privately and share it with friends. I would really enjoy this joy of discovery from the side of the people who have not heard about Georgia, not to say anything about the Georgian wine. All they have heard was that it's perhaps the place where Stalin was born, not the best, not the best point. So finally, in 2008, actually, there was Zurich Wine Ship Expo Wine exhibition where Georgia was the guest country. I remember going there almost every day with my husband, just drinking different wines, me chatting with people. There we met some of those winemakers that we then partnered up. We did not have this idea of importing wine, but we were just so encouraged by the people who have tried the wine there, or we met the people who have already been to Georgia and were so excited about their experiences. So I realized that would be actually great for both countries and for both people, for Swiss and Georgia, to kind of bring the best taste of Georgia here and help Swiss people discover something new that would help them, connect. I think Swiss market is really the best when it comes to innovation and when it comes to openness of trying new things.
Oh, I have a different experience on that.
Okay.
It was like the stereotype of the Swiss culture, be very precise. Also,
I think it's a paradox in a way, because in some ways it can be really open, in other ways it can just,
Yeah, to wine, maybe they're more open to
wine
try different
and to food,
wine.
yes.
Okay.
And I think when it comes to food, traveling, wine, they are certainly one of the first. Yes.
And then you mentioned that business can also help the society in a way. How did you integrate that concept into your business?
Yeah, maybe to give you a little bit of context and to your listeners on Georgian wine. In Soviet times, Georgia was a very close country, and the Georgian economy was based on this cost efficiency planned economy. So many traditions and many, especially the traditional way of winemaking, was conceived as something romantic, but not really practical. So it was not encouraged. People usually made the wine with this traditional method, but it was for their own private use, or perhaps to share it with their friends and relatives. Even my grandma made wine, the parents of my grandma and grandfather made wine. This tradition has managed to maintain uninterrupted, which is, I think, so amazing, despite all the pressure from the government. Then in the aftermath of the Soviet Union collapse, there was simply no money or no market for authentic quarry wines. Russia and mostly post-Soviet Union countries continued to remain the primary wine market for Georgian wines. They were not really the best quality wines, often falsified wines as well. I think in this way, like only these big, huge companies kind of managed to make the big profit and margins, and the small or middle-sized winemakers did not even exist. They did not even had an opportunity to bottle their wines. Then in the late 90s and early 20s, slowly the new winemakers started to emerge. And finally, in 2006, when due to political reasons, Russia decided to ban the import of Georgian wine, things started to change for good. Our winemakers like to say that those times were the worst and the best times for Georgian wine, because on the one hand, several wine companies went bankrupt without existing market, but others had to reinvent themselves, to change their strategy, to improve their quality. And nowadays, Georgian wine is already exporting in more than 50 countries. That's probably increasing every year. So when we started importing the wine in Switzerland last year, of course, our focus was primarily on quality, because here in Switzerland, you cannot really compete already existing low budget decent wines from those from Georgia. It makes no financial sense. And besides, we really wanted to bring something that is truly authentic and worthwhile trying. So when we held our meetings in Tbilisi, we selected the wineries that were small, perhaps, even the first generation of winemakers, where their parents and grandparents did make wine. They did have the knowledge of how to make good wine, but they have never bottled it. So it was a true joy to first even visit those places and see how things were growing and changing for good. You could see the joy in the eyes of the father, of course, who was the first in the generation to bottle the wine, but also you could see the excitement in the eyes of his kids or her kids. We also have a lot of female winemakers that were interested, that saw something value. They would work on the labels. They would sometimes even handwrite on the labels. We have a lot of handwritten labels. So it's a really a passion and professionalist knowledge coming together. I think how we try to support small and middle-sized businesses.
And I also like the fact that through importing Georgian wine, you also bring Georgian culture to the people who are not familiar with it.
Yes. I think that is the best part of doing what we do. I get so excited every time somebody makes an order and tells us that, I'm just hosting a Georgian evening. I've been there and I just want to share it with my friends. Or we have even people who are saying, you know what, I have never been there. I actually wanted to go, but now because of the COVID, I cannot go. But I just still want to cook something. And they pick usually khinkali, which is considered to be one of the most complicated dish to make, and I feel so overjoyed. Besides wine, I usually then start including herbs, which is hard to get in Georgia. I get overjoyed because that is truly what wine means in Georgia. It's not really what's in the glass. It's about the lifestyle. It's what happens at the Supra. Supra is a traditional Georgian, I don't know, it's hard to translate, but you can say some sort of dinner party where you have layers and layers of delicious food and of course wine, and you make toast after toast where you introduce different topic. It's about peace, and whoever makes the post about peace says a few words about it. It's about best times in life, where you share the joy that you experience, or the worst times, the death in the family. So over the course of this supra, you show the most vulnerable part of yourself to somebody who perhaps you just met. And like that, you both find this kind of connection that is so hard these days to find. You many ways become friends. And we had some customers who would ask me for certain requests that was for somebody that they met in Georgia. Like you said, I was in Georgia for a couple of days and I met this guy. He's such a nice guy. Can you please, people trying to help each other because they feel connected. I like it so much about
Yeah.
our culture.
And also, when I was in Georgia, I really like the fact that people there are so friendly. They are very authentic and very welcoming. It's a really different travel experience when I was there.
Yes, and you probably noticed that Georgia is a very religious country. For us, God is considered as somebody sent by God. And when I say this, considering how religious people are, it means a lot. So even when I worked for the nonprofit sector and we would visit the conflict-affected regions, we would sometimes visit the settlements where internally displaced people lived. They had just lost everything. They lost everything. They were just living in this small settlement and had really nothing. But yet, when we would go, they would try their best. They would go out, get to go to the shop, get something to just put on the table and to host us. That is truly in our DNA. And for me, moving to Switzerland, it was a bit hard. I had this instinct every time my husband's friends came. I had this instinct just to rush and just to do something to put something on the table. And my husband would say, "Come on, just share." But yeah, it is really in our DNA.
Yeah. Like, tell us a little bit about Georgian wine. What are the interesting facts about Georgian wine?
Yes, I think there are many interesting facts and stories about Georgian wine, which we can talk. But if I had to sum up all the experiences associated with Georgian wines and all the feedbacks that we have been getting in one word, that would be discovery. Those who have tried natural wine, orange wine, or have not tried that, they all find Georgian query wines very unique, unusual. They sometimes just fall in love with it immediately. Sometimes they say, "Oh, that just sounds a bit unusual." In either case, you will find something new if you try Georgian wine. It is considered now officially after the archaeological findings the birthplace of wine, because they have found out the wine creation back to the South Caucasian. They traced it back to the South Caucasian people. And now we say that Georgia has 8,000 years of winemaking tradition, which we can back up with the scientific results, and we're very proud of that. Besides, Georgia has over 500 native grape varieties that grow nowhere else in the world. Of course, not all of them are now cultivated, but because also considering our past and with the Soviet Union, many grapes were not encouraged to grow. So, but now we kind of try to bring those grapes back to life in a bigger scale, so that we can see what kind of potential those grapes have. It's a lot to learn still. The key to the uniqueness of Georgian wine is this traditional winemaking technology called query winemaking. Query is the large terracotta pots. It was initially historically used for the fermentation and for the maturity of the wine, but gradually somehow it got forgotten everywhere, except in Georgia. In Georgia, people continued to use these pots for winemaking. So another ancient practice of winemaking that is used in Georgia is skin contact. It's when the grape skins are not removed, as in the typical red wine production, but they are kept in contact with the juice for days or even months, depending on the region. And that's how we make white wine. And the result of this skin contact winemaking is this unique color, also referred as amber, this unique texture and flavor of Georgian wine. And it's particularly appealing for people who like natural wine, who like this fresh taste of Query. So I think for everybody who loves wine and wants to try something new, there is plenty to pick from.
Mm-hmm. And besides the wine business you are running now in Switzerland, are you still engaged something with NGO or human rights?
Yes, I work part-time at Swiss NGOs, at the Swiss NGO as an intercultural translator, meaning that I help lawyers who are assisting the asylum seekers from Georgian in translation. And I also coordinate weekly meetups for the female migrants here in my region, in Baden. We meet weekly to help each other better integrate in the new culture. I believe that we are on this planet in many ways to help each other and then to thrive together. So for me, being where I am today, acknowledging all the privileges that I had, including the opportunity to get the quality legal education, I feel really privileged. And because I know from the firsthand experience all the challenges that the individuals and especially women can face in the developing countries, especially in the conflict-affected countries, I really want to help them, make them feel that they are not alone, even when at times their experiences might seem very unique and it might seem very isolating. In many ways, we humans, we're at our core connected. We all want the same things from wine. We have the same way of experiencing pain. So that's how I try to make my small contribution for the people who are just arriving in Switzerland and are in the process of getting their asylum application reviewed.
Mm-hmm. And if the audience are interested to learn more about your stories or your engagement with human rights or even try Georgian wine, where can they find you?
I think personally, to connect with me, the LinkedIn would be a good place. My name is Shorena Messerli. But yeah, with this last name, you can find me on LinkedIn. For the wine, we have an online shop. It's called ninovino.ch. And we offer currently perhaps the largest selection of Georgian wine in Switzerland. So if you could visit the page, you'll find all the different varieties, grapes, types. And I hope you'll find something that you like, something new and exciting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for today's session. And we learned a lot about Georgian wines.
Thank you.
Shorena has nicely offered 20% discount for the audience of this podcast for all their product range on the online wine shop at www.ninovino.ch using promo code FASTTRACK. The offer is valid till the end of this year, so check it out, and all the details will be in the show notes. If you like today's content, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next episode.